Jordan is the global direct-to-consumer and e-commerce lead at the Kellogg Company. We all know what the Kellogg's Company is, right? And their broad range of products from cereal to waffles, Pop-Tarts, and snack foods. And totally random, but I was just noshing on a Rice Krispies treat that we bought instead of Halloween candy this year. So I'm not sure how much we will have left by the time Halloween comes around because my kids have already dug into that as well. But Jordan, I'm looking forward to learning more and hearing how you sell CPG as D2C. Are there CTAs that lower CPAs? What are KPIs for improving ROI? I could do this all day. What other acronyms will we come up with in this Fireside chat? To help, to help ask these questions, this session will be moderated by Eric Shoicket, the head of agency sales for Audigent. Welcome to the stage, both of you guys, and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Jordan, how are you again?
Good. Good to see you, Eric. Good to be here.
All right. So let's get started. It's been a pleasure connecting with you so far. Obviously, you met some of our team. It's been good to hang out, chat a little bit about what you do. So let me kick it off.
I love the background, first of all. I just got to call that out.
Let's be honest. I grew up on Kellogg's, and I'm still really eating a lot of Kellogg's. I have two kids, 9 and 4. So I'm glad you can see that. But I do want to say it's not to benefit our conversation only. It benefits my eating habit. But in terms of, I guess let's start there. I mean, first of all, what is, and then I'll go into formal introductions here. What's your favorite Kellogg's snack now, when you grew up, whatever it is?
Oh man. So now I think I'm gonna kind of position myself as an LA person, but definitely lean a little bit more towards like the RX bars of the world. We actually, I mean, we'll go into this, but we've been working in my previous role. I worked with RX bar early on, so I've had like an affinity towards them early on and been eating it ever since. But I grew up as like a Frosted Flakes guy. We always had Frosted Flakes in our house, so Tony has a soft spot in my heart.
I love it. I think he has a soft spot on everyone's in everyone's heart. But for me, it's got to be Cheez-Its, right? So it has a ton of range, right? The kids love it. I love it. I think my fanciest guests love it. I throw it right on the charcuterie board, you know?
Exactly. You got to have it. With did you see the wine and cheese box that they did?
I mean, of course. Come on.
Yeah.
It's like it's staple here. So little icebreaker there for the crowd. But so obviously today we're going to talk about direct consumer marketing, your role within Kellogg's, and just to formal introductions as it goes. I'm Eric Shoicket. As Matt said, I handle or I should say, I oversee our agency and brand sales team here at Audigent. Really, just the overview of what is Audigent, because we are only 3 or 4 years old in the digital space. We're a next generation first party data management platform. So, obviously we have an innovative suite of products in kind of an old school field, like a DMP, data management platform type space, but we're making that new. We're helping, to build products that build the future of cookieless identity. And we actually call ourselves a data agency. So we partner with publishers as a monetization platform or engine, I should say, for their valuable data. And, also a strategic media partner to our friends on the agency side and the brand side like yourself, so they can use efficient buying methods that we've created and differentiate ourselves with, use our powerful, clean first-party data to create and execute their campaigns across, a lot of different digital mediums. So we're providing somewhat of a data home, right, for the most exclusive content audiences for many influential brands like Condé Nast and Universal Music, Warner Music, American Media, just to name a few. So we're focused not only on aggregating this decoupled data from the pubs I mentioned, but really trying to transform how verified and opt-in data powers the social and programmatic campaigns for some of the largest brands in the world. So we have a bunch of breakthrough products like smart PMPs and contextual PMPs, and even cookieless header bidding that where we're making these audiences that are proprietary and exclusive to us actionable or available across the various digital ecosystems. So enough about me. Jordan, I'm going to turn to you. Obviously, who are you? What's the background at Kellogg's? What are you doing as, I guess, the director of the global direct-to-consumer e-commerce group?
Yeah, good. I mean, first of all, I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about just because, I think a big part of what we're doing in this space is around first party data. So I think we'll have lots to chat about. But yeah, Jordan Narducci, I joined Kellogg's about a year ago, which is crazy because a lot of that time's been obviously during COVID. But I was brought in. My title is a tongue twister. It's global director of direct to consumer. So I was brought in to really help develop our direct-to-consumer strategy. We've been playing in that space for quite some time. RX Bar is a great example of that. But really, I think it was how do we want to move forward with everything? I think prior to COVID and now today, I think more than ever, there's a need for that, and consumers are demanding that. And so, yeah, I think. It's an exciting space, and I should say prior to Kellogg's, I was at a startup called Snack Nation. So it was a healthy snack delivery company, or it is a healthy snack delivery company, and I led up and launched our direct to consumer offering. So I think a little bit of a non-traditional background maybe for CPG, but one that I think more and more companies are getting into.
Yeah, I love that you got your start there. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that. But before that, I mean, so you've been brought in to lead Kellogg's strategy as a whole in the D2C space. I mean, I guess let's start here. How does a big brand like Kellogg's define D2C? And why do you guys want to sell direct?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think actually, and it's a really good question because Kellogg's, I think, defines D2C a little more broadly than the traditional sense of just selling direct. And so, on one side, like on the non-traditional side, we look at it as basically you could have even a non-transactional site where you're capturing consumer insights, right? And so, that's going into your world of like, really, you could have personalized content, you could have recipes, you could have a community forum where you're capturing data and insights. And it's not even necessarily any sort of transactional element. And we could define that as direct to consumer because we're marketing them direct, right? And then, also on that side of like kind of non-traditional definition of D2C that we're getting into is around partnerships, right? Like we did a partnership with Deliveroo last year in the UK where we developed actually a really cool concept where it was called Kellogg's Kitchen Creations, and we were selling basically lunch bowls, snack bowls, all sorts of breakfast items that were basically being delivered on demand using Kellogg's products. So there was like a Rice Krispies savory bowl and things like that. Really clever, the chef-driven initiative. So we've been doing kind of like interesting stuff in that space. And then I think more traditionally, like the RX bars of the world that have a brand store that sells direct, a subscription element, or even more around like personalized offerings. We at Kelloggs have done stuff in the past with like our Bare Naked brand, which was called Bare Naked Custom, where you could actually like customize based on 50 different ingredients with like they had coffee, they had jalapenos, they had all sorts of crazy stuff, and you could make your own granola. And then we got a ton of learnings of like what should we be thinking about as like the next product offering. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff. So it's kind of a wide range, wider than that typical definition, but yeah, I think to answer your question, the why element, I think it's important to look at it from like both lens, like from the consumer point of view. First of all, it's not just about like putting all of our products online, like everything that you have in your background, which I love. It's not just about putting all of those online, right? Like why would the consumer come and purchase those from us direct rather than from their typical grocer, right? And so it's understanding how can we use direct to consumer to create a unique offering that you can't necessarily do in the D2C space. And that's going to be attractive enough to the consumer to come and want to buy from us. And then from a business perspective, it's about, and this is where I think it goes into kind of your world of, it's about, like it's, first of all, it has to make sense from a commercial point of view, right? Like the revenue and the costs and everything has to make sense. But then, there's all these indirect benefits, what we call indirect benefits. So it's like, it's the first party data and what we can do with that. It's it's testing and learning and incubating new brands and products digitally first. And it's about like engaging with our consumers more directly rather than through our retail partners. And so it's about basically this concept of like always on marketing and meeting them where they are and where they want to shop and when they want to shop.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the Bare Naked custom combinations. It's like the much healthier version of the Coke machines in the the
Exactly.
restaurants. But I don't know if people are going to select my apple chocolate jalapeno. Yeah,
You never know, man. That might be who knows, right? That might lead to us realizing maybe there's a big demand for it.
Sweet and salty, they tell me.
Yeah.
No, I love that you said that, and I do love I found it very interesting when we were originally speaking just about the innovation between as far as what D2C means overall, and then for you and Kellogg's and kind of like innovating on that at such a large company. I think that's one of the coolest things that you could do. I mean, so I'm all about the kind of non-traditional definitions or redefinitions. Like here at Audigent, we try to redefine what a DMP is, right? So we act more like a data agency, as I said. Not only do we help create new revenue streams for the publishers and all that valuable data they let us use, but also for we would never charge them, to sit on our platform like old DMPs might. Not to mention when a brand works with us, we would never charge or upcharge them, I should say, for the insights we gain and the audiences that we create within our DMP. So there's ownership for both parties, and we don't have to upcharge because we don't rent. So I also love that. It's why I can come to a company like this and hopefully redefine what some little aspect of marketing does in our overall landscape. I do want to ask you more about your team and your what you're doing on the global growth team. I mean, how would you explain what that is? How does Kellogg's direct consumer fit within global growth?
Yeah. So the way I describe it is it's kind of like a center of excellence. So or like an internal strategy team. So we basically partner with the regions and the brands to help them develop new capabilities. We develop playbooks, we develop technical know-how, skill sets, to basically make them help them build and execute their strategies. So it's really like a partnership model, and us, working with them to either develop the know-how or also execute on those. So it's a bit of a mix.
Okay. So when you're doing that, I mean, how are you building, D2C? How does Kellogg's launch a brand, make it less costly? What does that mean for you guys when you're, I guess, testing and learning?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a big part of, I think, where we see D2C fitting is like our overall broader strategy is we want to be launching products digitally first, and test and learn and incubate them before bringing them to retail. And so I think, one example we have is we're actually going to be launching a new brand that we've been working on that's going to be launching in the UK. And that's a brand that we're launching direct to consumer. And I think the idea behind it is really we want to be able to basically test demand for this product. We want to learn, optimize, iterate on it before we bring it to retail, which is the ultimate goal. I think partnered with that also is this brand is going to have an element of personalization that you can't necessarily do at retail. So we're going to be able to kind of like tap into that element, get a lot of learnings, much like I think the Bare Naked Custom had, and then bring like our best foot forward, like the certain flavors and certain unique offerings that we think will perform best at retail based on the consumer surveys, the ratings and reviews, and everything that we were able to capture earlier on.
So digital means in this case more convenient and less costly?
The ultimate goal is I think to launch more effectively, and I think the way that we're thinking about driving efficiencies, one area is through this concept of like a global direct to consumer platform. So at companies, I'm sure all companies, it can take a little while to get your first direct to consumer offering off the ground because all the integrations you need to do, build it into your systems. And so we're thinking about it from a much more holistic point of view of like, how do we create a global platform that can be leveraged across all of our different regions and across all of our different brands when and if they want that. And usually to date, most of our initiatives have been driven by brands. And so if you think about that, like if we have these integrations pre-built, and really it's all about just the front end then and reskinning the look and feel for your brand or your use case, it's going to have dramatic cost savings as a whole. And then I think coupled with that, on the product side, it's about making sure that we are delivering products that we know will perform better after testing them digitally first. And I should say that like digitally first doesn't necessarily mean that we're always going to launch direct first, right? Like that could be, we might launch with a partner, we might launch with one of our retail partners, we might launch with a pure play partner. Like there's a way to launch that's not direct, and it will depend on the need and the use case of the brand. But I think just having that capability and that offering, and depending on what the needs are, enabling speed, efficiency, and and really just ease for brands that don't really have the know-how or desire to really get their to spend a lot of time setting it up. So we want to just make it faster and easier.
Okay, and so I was also interested. How do you decide where the product is going to be tested or launched, kind of to understand that aspect of data and why it works and why it doesn't? How does that process go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, oftentimes to date, it's a combination of factors. It's, usually it's a regional base, like Kellogg's is divided into 4 regions. And usually it's a region is wanting to get into a certain, maybe it's a category, a new space, or test a new product offering. And then within the region, identifying the markets or the countries that we want to launch in will be based on a mix of, I think, publicly available data and also proprietary data that we've unlocked based on ancillary products, ancillary categories, things like that we can understand where we think it will be most successful, where there's demand for that type of offering, and then putting our best foot forward. And then if it goes well, obviously we want to scale into more and more markets and more and more regions with these offerings.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I've always wondered, what the kind of the process is for where and why. So you told me that anything in digital, it really has the opportunity to be data driven. So how do you see Kellogg's kind of innovating in that space?
Yeah, good question. So I think, first of all, 100%, like, I think everything can be data driven and should be data driven. I think with us, I think there's kind of 2 areas that we're, I think, doing some interesting stuff in the direct side. Is one is around like doing these kind of tests and learns digitally first before the product is available. So what we're calling like basically digital research, where we do A/B split tests on or multivariate tests on social platforms, and we actually put like real dollars to this, and we can test different offerings, different positioning, different markets even, to test demand before the product's available to sell. And so that by the time we're ready to launch, we actually have a ton of learnings on what's going to perform, and we can optimize our website experience, our offering and our positioning before we go live. So I think that's like a really cool space that we're starting to tap more and more into, and I think in the future will be like a strong kind of research tool for our company.
Yeah. So just to jump in on that. So when you say, learn what's performing, what is performance equal sales? What does that mean?
So in this case, it definitely doesn't, right? Because we aren't selling the product yet. And so in this case, we're actually measuring as a proxy for sales, we're measuring clicks, right? And so let's say we run 2 different assets, 2 different tests on a social platform and put some dollars behind it. Based on the click-through rate of those offerings and the positionings, we get some really valuable learnings. And then actually, it doesn't end there. We actually have some websites then that we've developed to have consumer surveys and say, look, like this product isn't available yet, but we'd love to get your feedback. But clearly, you have a demand for it. Like you've gone so far as to click, which is a big measurement of performance in our
So,
space.
so Jordan, sorry, you're getting the seed set of people or focus group from people that are actively
Yes.
engaging. Okay.
100%. Yeah. So it's like actual media dollars, as if they're seeing their Facebook as if, it's a normal day, and that this is a company advertising to them.
Yep.
And then they click on it. And then that, just from that click, in its own right, and in the engagement we see, the shares and all of that, we get a lot of learnings. But then you can go a level deeper and you get a ton of learnings on site, right? Through a combination of surveys. You can do a heat map to see where they're clicking, where they're looking, how many people go to the end of the page. Like, there's a ton of data that you get on site. So it's a combination of those two things that you can get a ton of data that's really important for you. Then we can then take that, optimize our experiences, our ad, everything in preparation for the transaction part of it. So I think that's a really cool kind of new capability that we've been leaning into lately.
Yeah, Jordan, you said you're not a data guy. I mean, you're speaking the language pretty well. It's like what you just said really hits home with me, and I think a lot of people. It's for us, when we look at consumers and how we match them with brands. I mean, there's rhyme and reason behind that, right? It's when we have code, not cookies, down on each page of every publisher and their subdomain pages, we understand that stuff too. Where'd you come from? What are you doing on the page? What are you reading, clicking, hovering, time spent? Like, if you're engaged in content, that's probably a good place where, a brand who wants an audience that likes that content to engage with that consumer. So it's like we kind of look at the same things, sometimes for the same reasons, sometimes for a difference, but it's like what you just said makes a ton of sense to me. We do a similar process on our end by the way we track consumer and page behavior. I did want to touch on something that you had mentioned before, because I love where you came from at Snack Nation. And now, you come from a Snack Nation, go to a big, well-known CPG company like Kellogg's. Explain that to some of the people who are, in our audience, who've tuned in, who might want to do the same, or, are wondering what it's like to go from small to big. And how does your experience at that last company help with what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'll start with the end. I mean, I think without that foundation of the smaller company, I would not be in this role, right? Like I learned everything. I mean, I learned almost everything I know about digital marketing and e-commerce and direct to consumer in that role. And I think, startups really gear you for throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, seeing what works, pivoting, learning, being quick and agile. And I think that's what Kellogg's is wanting to do more and more of as we think about this like digital transformation for the company, and the global growth team. I think there's a lot of people like me at Kellogg's with not necessarily in the direct to consumer space, but like that have a very specific technical skill set that they probably learned outside of Kellogg's. And now we've brought in like the foundation of people. And this goes back a couple of years, like well before COVID, we were thinking about this and showing, results as a result of that, investment in the people. And I think, after COVID, I mean, it's only accelerating, I think, the momentum with, online grocery, e-commerce, and direct to consumer. I mean, it's three good areas. And then, Kellogg's as a whole, just, I think it's a great space. I've been really, fortunate to be in this role. Really impressed by the people I'm working alongside, and really excited about our future.
So that's from my, I've been at large companies like a CBS and a Yahoo, and smaller companies too. And it's like, not that this is, I'm trying to put this as politically correct as possible, but when you come to a big company, is there more room for error? Is there more money to use? Is it's, I know you want to answer that carefully, but I'm just wondering, because it's different when, it's like being the small real estate buyer versus the big one, or, it's like, does there have to be more perfection at Snack Nation, or do you have more resources at Kellogg's that allow you to do different or better things?
I think that, at a startup, I think in both cases, at least from a direct to consumer lens, I think there's opportunity to, to take some risks and get some learnings. And I would say, like, that's kind of the point of direct to consumer, if you think about it, right? Like it's about testing and learning and iterating. And so I don't think in either case there's like this concept of failure, because it's about what do you learn from that experience, and maybe we avoided, a mistake somewhere else that might have, been a huge opportunity cost or that might have been a huge cost that we saved. So I don't think it's like I want to look at it through that lens. I think the difference between the two is that at a startup, I think I said this already, like you throw a lot of stuff at the wall and you see what works, and then you kind of lean into that. I think Kellogg's is a lot more structured in terms of a strategy. Like we didn't have I don't think we had the time, the resources, or the capabilities to really take that time to develop that strategy in my previous role. It was more about like, let's learn, let's test a bunch of things and see what works. Kellogg's is much more focused and directed. And so I think, I think it's just a little bit different, but I think interestingly, I think at its core, where they overlap is on the data and insights side. Like I actually think like first party data is the reason why we were doing at Snack Nation, why we were doing direct to consumer. We were capturing consumer insights for our brand partners. And at Kellogg's, it's a big part of the reason why we are and will be doing direct to consumer in the future.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, you told me that obviously Kellogg's gathers a ton of valuable first party data, and it's not necessarily all about conversion. So like, what are the ways that Kellogg's brings consumers together with a brand and enhance that relationship? So I feel like there's a few parts here, right? So it's, you have your brand loyalists, you have your brand competitor loyalists, and then you also have those consumers who may be lapsed in terms of buying. Like how do you enhance the relationship or even refine that relationship for Kellogg's through what you're doing?
I mean, I think I can speak to this in a couple different lanes, but let's see how this goes and direct me if I'm going the wrong way. I think like one area that I think about for like first party data and and not just being about conversion tactics, although I think ultimately it's about increasing our lifetime value, right? And doing that through connection. But I think if you think about it in an indirect way, one thing that I've learned since being here is one of our key drivers of media efficiency is transactional data. So learning like basically which consumers buy from us are very likely, like, so for you, like you buy Cheez-Its from us. You're very likely, which we see in the background, to also buy Pringles from us, right? And Pop-Tarts and the list goes on.
I mean, I feel like you're defining me a little bit about the direction of snacks. I do have Raisin Bran, although it's crunch, so it's not that healthy. And then look, Kellogg's red berries in the back.
you got the stuff. Exactly. So yeah, I think what's interesting is I think for us, not all first data should be treated equally, and I think like first party data is a term that gets tossed around a lot in I think the CPG industry because of GDPR and CCPA and like some of the stuff that's happening with privacy. There's more I think pressure on us to capture our own data, and I think a great example of that is us capturing more and more transactional data, and so I think when we do that, we know that we can then build lookalike campaigns and drive media efficiency through that. So in some ways it's kind of a roundabout way of getting to a more efficient conversion, but it's an indirect way, and so I think that's one area that we focus a lot, and I think direct to consumer can enable for us is capturing that additional data.
So, and then how would you describe, like, what are those types of data? So transactional data. You also told me that you have data, on the pages of your brand websites. I mean, where is that, all of that data? And I guess what are the different types that go into your kind of mixing bowl over at Kellogg's?
Yeah, so I mean, a little outside kind of my wheelhouse, but we have a consumer data platform that we pull all of our data into, and basically we leverage that to drive a lot of our media efficiency, and and all of our sites basically connect into that in a compliant way to privacy policies depending on the region that you're operating in. And I think like one thing that's probably worth noting is we have this, I think Kellogg's was very early with recognizing the importance of this. And so we have this really important platform called Kellogg's Family Rewards, which is a loyalty program that we've had for quite some time. And it's, it's evolving, as we speak. And, a big part of that is, uploading receipts and rewarding people for that. But I think that also comes with that is this massive amount of data and consumer insights that we're able to glean, and then also start personalizing our offerings based on those surveys that they take through KFR or through interactions they've had on that website and experience. So, or even receipts they've uploaded or transactional data that's coming through. So we think that's like a foundational element that puts us in a really good position for all of this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The right way.
No, it does. It makes perfect sense. I mean, when you guys look at, ingesting all of that data, obviously with privacy in mind, is that on the mind of not only your group, but basically every consumer marketing group within Kellogg's? I mean, things like privacy and GDPR, and even from a data perspective as well, the cookieless future, is that a hot topic within the walls of Kellogg's?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think for all the reasons that we spoke about before, around GDPR and CCPA and cookieless future, like those things to me can all be bundled together into the reasons why we need to be thinking about first party data and capturing it. Do all the brands and everybody within Kellogg's necessarily need to know everything about that? No, but for us that's executing on the digital side, it's a firm part of our overall strategy in making sure that we're compliant with it, and capturing. I think for me, the way I look at it is like we're an input to that. Like we're direct consumer is an input of the data to the people that are going to be using that, the marketers that are going to be using that, and then the insights and analytics team is part of that. That's like actually evaluating that data and helping dissect it. So it's kind of like this virtuous cycle of like us capturing the data for them dicing it and using it in different ways, and making sure that we're compliant as well, and then us getting more and more of that data through D2C. So it's kind of this nice virtuous cycle, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Again, I mean, it hits home with me in terms of what you're saying. I mean, it is a process and a cycle that needs to be taken, especially, at this day and age. I mean, what is the data? Where does it come from? What are you doing with it? And is it in a legal way? I mean, for us, it's a process. We don't just bank data, but it has to be clean data. We actually throw out 60% of fraudulent or bot controlled data. So when we're starting to build campaigns with data hygiene in mind, it starts there before anything. So I love that you guys are thinking that way. And it also presents a better experience for, with consumers that know they're not being taken advantage of. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the world in terms of marketing and how data is found. And I think people are more and more, as the kids would say, woke to that. So I'm glad Kellogg's is too. So a few questions from the audience are coming in, if you don't mind. Don't worry, I'm not going to hit you over the head with any data that makes us both have a brain melt. But some of the stuff that you were talking about before hit home. I mean, what are, based on your experience, I mean, what are the company values that that matter most to say young consumers? What have you found through research and data, I guess I should say, on that track?
So company values, I think it's about, well, first of all, we don't market to kids. I think that's an important thing, right? We need to be careful about that. And so I think it's about, trust and I think relationship building with every brand is a little different, and it's a little bit outside of probably my technical, know-how. But I think the way we approach it is like, you really got to lean into, the brand value and equity. And I think for every brand is a company at Kellogg's is very differently, and why they trust that brand and why they, why they wake up in the morning and they're excited to eat this product. So I think it's a little different depending on the brand and the offering. And I think there's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me thinking about this stuff. We've been doing a lot of kind of like brand foundational training within our company for people with a little less kind of brand experience like myself. And it's pretty amazing what the team's doing. And I think the way that these brands are coming to life, I'm like in awe every day of the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Anything, have you learned anything that you thought you might not coming to Kellogg's yet?
A ton. I mean, everything I just spoke about, like on the brand side, I think, coming from a startup, we didn't, I mean, we had a really strong brand and that people had a huge affinity to, but we didn't focus as much, or at least I didn't focus as much on that side. And I think that's like, that's a balance that Kellogg's, I think, aims to strike really well, is like, how do you build that brand affinity and equity in the more traditional sense while also driving conversion? And that balancing act is one that I think Kellogg's does really well. And I think that I'm still like learning a lot about, is more on the brand side for me personally.
Okay, good. And then one from the audience, which I think is obviously relevant for the times. I mean, how has COVID shifted the way that the company is thinking about DTC? Which brands should be priorities, the scale of launches? You touched on a little bit about that before, but obviously with COVID-19 taking place and this pandemic that we're in, has that been a major upheaval for specific brands or Kellogg's on the whole?
I mean, definitely Kellogg's as a whole, and I would say not just direct to consumer, just e-commerce more generally. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's through our e-commerce platform. It could be through Omni, like Amazon, or sorry, like pure play like Amazon, or an Omni experience like our retail partners. So it varies across regions and brands. But I think COVID is really just accelerating everything that we were doing prior to COVID. I hear a lot about like 5 to 10 years in acceleration in this space. And so for me, I think we're not rushing into, I think, a response to COVID. And I think what's been really cool is to see, I think, some of our, peers, the way that they've responded to COVID is really cool to see. Like, there's a lot of innovation happening and a lot of people that are playing into the convenience angle, which I think is important. But I think it's also about like, what's going to stand the test of time after COVID, right? And not just focusing on a transactional capability that people can get now, like, bundles and capabilities and things like that. But it's like, what's truly going to add value to the consumer after COVID? And so, I can't speak to the exact, launches and things that we're planning, but I think it's like all of the brands with COVID are putting more attention on digital more generally. And direct to consumer is a big part of our digital strategy globally.
So you just broke news. You are going to be launching? No, that makes a lot of sense. And then, I feel the same way. It's like a lot of people are doing more than they ever have before, and a lot of times with less than they ever have before. And the acceleration that we've seen, I mean, technologically, data-wise, I couldn't agree more. I feel like we're in it ourselves at my own company. But another one from the audience here is Kellogg's versus not just the competitors of CPG brands, right? But Kellogg's versus the new style and new way that D2C is. If I'm getting hit all day, on Instagram and Facebook with different types of socks and tennis balls and whatever. I mean, do you guys pay attention to that? Or is it, because I know you are defining D2C a little bit differently, but what do you think about Kellogg's versus that new school?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I definitely, we pay attention to it all, I think, and we build it into our strategy and how we want to, play in this space. I think, I mean, Eric, I think we talked a little bit about this. Like, there's a little bit of a convergence happening right now, which I think is interesting in this space, right? Where you have some of the like inherent, like direct to consumer, digitally native companies like, the Bonobos and the, Caspers of the world, Warby Parker, they're all moving into retail. And then you have like the Kellogg's of the world and our peers that are all moving, into direct. And so there's kind of this like intersection that's happening, and and in some cases we'll launch with the Kellogg's name attached to it, and I think that gives that, going back to the trust and the authenticity, that gives that label of it. But there's also instances where we'll launch brands like in the UK when we're launching, that's not going to have the Kellogg's name attached to it. And I think that's a big part of it as well, is sometimes it's about launching kind of new brands and innovating outside of the Kellogg's name. And so I think it'll depend a little bit, depending on the offer and the situation.
Yeah, I love it. Makes sense. All right. I think our time is up, but I just want to say thanks to Brand Innovators. It's been awesome. Matt, I see you went shopping during the break here.
I love it.
Since you definitely one-upped my unintentional Rice Krispies treat snack from earlier with your intentional product placement, I'm embarrassed that you caught me finishing my breakfast.
Sorry. I also wanted to just thank you, Jordan. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and speaking with you. I love what you're doing at Kellogg's, and I'm sure we will talk again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, guys. I'm hungry. I got to go eat lunch now with all these snacks in the store, Brian. Nice chatting with you.
Thank you guys both, Jordan and Eric. One of the recurring themes that we have heard throughout the chats today is that selling direct isn't just about driving extra sales. It's about owning the experience at every touch point. And that used to be called the marketing funnel that those of us who went to business school may remember. But what Jordan was referencing was actually a cycle. I call it a positive feedback loop, where conversion is really only halfway through that loop, because then you have your post-purchase retention strategy that you need. So again, thank you guys for joining us.